Hello friends, welcome back to Aunt Debbie's Boutique. Are you a person like me who loves the look of hexagon quilts, but know that by doing English paper piecing, all those little hexagons together by hand, that you never make it to the end? I know I'm a person who would think this was a good idea and cut out millions of hexagons, get all my little paper pieces, my thread, everything together and go to town on it 90 to nothing, and it'd get to be the size of about a placemat, and I'd be bored with it and it'd go in my unfinished pile, never to be resurrected again. So I love hexagon quilts, but I just know I don't have the patience to put one together by hand. So when I discovered this method of doing hexagons that you can do on the machine, I jumped on it. Now these are much bigger hexagons than most paper piecing is, but you could do this on any size. It's just the smaller it gets, the more delicate it will be, the more exacting you have to be. So we're going to make a table runner today that could easily be made into a quilt with a much simpler method. What we need is a pattern for a half hexagon. And what this is a 9.5 inch hexagon that was cut in half, only I added a 1/4 inch seam allowance so I could put it back together. Now I have made a template of this and it will be linked to the description below. It's a Dropbox link and you can download it and use it if you want. I traced mine onto this comic book boards that I use to wrap my fabric around, and it's pretty sturdy and makes a good template, and I just used it and cut around it just like I would a ruler. And then you're going to need 9 10-inch squares, and I used leftovers from a layer cake, and here's an example. And since you only use 9, this would be a really good way to use up extras that you have floating around. You're also going to need some batting, some backing, and we're going to do something new called big stitch quilting. So I'm going to use some DMC embroidery floss. You can also use crochet thread that comes on a big spool if you want. And I bought these, no I didn't, my daughter gave them to me for my birthday. It was on my wish list. But these are little templates to make designs for quilting. And it wasn't very expensive for this whole package, so I will link them down below. And I'm either going to do the flower or the Dresden plate. I think I'll do the flower because it's less stitches. And we will use that when we do our big stitch quilting. Of course, you can always do machine quilting on this. Now, the way I cut these out, and here's some extra ones I cut out, is I folded the 10-inch square in half. Then I laid my and I specially designed this template to use up 10-inch squares, so that's why it goes almost to the max here on these ends, and there's very little waste then. And then I just used my rotary cutter and cut around it. You could also trace it. You could trace it from the back side if you wanted to. It might be easier to see, and cut it out with scissors. But then you have 2 that are matching, and that's what you need. You need 2 of each fabric. Okay, I'm gonna lay this stuff aside, and I'm gonna pick out my ironing board because I've already laid out my table runner like I want it. Like I said, these were just some leftovers from, well, they're actually left over from the layer cake that we used for the star quilt. I believe we did that early in January, or it's close to the first of the year. So I still have some of those left, and I thought this would make a nice neutral table runner. So you lay it out with one hexagon, which of course is 2 squares at the top and the bottom. Then you do 2, and in the middle 3. So what we're going to have is kind of an oval shape project here, or table runner. Now, what's neat about this is I'm going to move this one piece here out of the way, and I am going to sew these 3 together, here and here, and make a row. Then I'm going to sew this whole row together. Kind of move these a little bit. So that's a whole row. Then there's a row, and here's a row. So what we have is 4 rows to sew together. Then we'll come back and sew them, the rows, to each other. We will have one on each side here that's all by itself in the row. So I'm going to flip this, and now we want to make sure, let me double check this. See if I'm thinking right here. Yeah. We want about 1/4 inch to stick out on both ends when we line these up. Can you see that there's about 1/4 inch sticking out there and about 1/4 inch here? And I'm going to go ahead and pin that. Then when I take it over to the sewing machine, I want to stitch a line from right where that V is, where the 2 meet, to where the V is on this side. I think I'll even draw it in so you can see what I'm talking about. So can you see that? Let me put it this way. Where our stitching line is going to start right where the 2 fabrics meet and leave a little V, and it's going to end up the same way over here. That way when we open it up, it's not going to be skidded one way or the other. And I'm going to do the same thing with this one. I'm going to make sure I don't get them out of order. So this goes like this. I'm going to go ahead and pin this one too, and get this row sewn together. Okay, let me take it over to the sewing machine and sew this together, and then we'll go to the next step. Now I have this first strip sewn together, and we're going to need to press it, and then I'm going to show you how to sew on this one block that's by itself. So let me get my pressing mat out here. And because this is not a quilt, it's a table runner, and so I don't have to worry about the strength of my seams because it's not be that heavy, I am going to go ahead and just press the seams open on this one. You can press them to one side or the other, but you'll want to alternate which side you do it and every other row be opposite of each other. It's not that hard to do, but this is simpler if you're just doing a table runner. And even with quilt, it'll be okay. It's just that our seams are stronger if they are ironed to one side or the other. Okay, now make sure I've got it lined up right, because this goes to this, this to this, this to this. Now I am going to put the right sides together here, and I want to line everything up. So once again, we have the same amount sticking out on each side. And we want it lined up. If we had ironed our seams out, we could have lined it right up exactly. But you can just flip it over to make sure. Do you see what I'm saying? So that and that goes together, but then we can open that back up. Same on this side. I'm going to flip this open so I can line it up with that other point. And then flip it back open and pin it. And now we just have this one seam that we have to sew across here. I'm going to put one more pin in it and take it over the sewing machine. You want to sew from seam to seam. Once again, let me set my seam. I should have done that before. Let's iron our seam open. Okay, we've got the first two rows sewed together. Now I'm going to take this over to the machine and sew these 5 pieces together. Now I'm ironing my seams open again. Get this turned the right way. Now we're ready to sew this onto this. And how you can line it up, you want this seam and this seam on top of each other. But these little dog ears that we like to cut off, they make it so much easier to line up. That's why I don't cut them off on this one. So we'll line that one up, and of course this one's just going to come off here to the end. And again, we'll start at our seam there. Line these 2 dog ears up. And it will end here at the seam. This will still go out 1/4 of an inch, but we'll quit sewing at the seam. Just to keep everything straight, I'm going to add a pin in the middle of each of these. Because see, that one's wanting to, I'm going to have to give it a bit of a tug to get it fit right. Now let's go sew this one. I hope you were able to see me sewing on the last couple of clips. I had my camera pointed a little bit higher than usual, so I apologize if something was cut out. Okay, I'm gonna steam it real good and hope I have all my seams opened out like I want them. All right, it's half done. Now we're just going to do the last 2 rows, and actually there's a 3rd row that's just 1, and sew them onto here, and I'll do that and be back with you to show you how we're going to finish this up. Now I've got my table runner all put together. I'll kind of slide it here so you can see all of it. I use some Mary Ellen's Best Press and squirted it down real good and ironed it so it'd lay nice and smooth. Then I cut out a piece of batting, about 1 inch bigger all the way around, and I cut out the backing a little bit bigger than the batting. Now the backing you can get a yard. It will fit on a yard of fabric. This being the width of your fabric, this being the yard length. And let's see how big this is going to be. Okay, it's about 36 inches, or it will be when it's finished, by, well, let's turn it this way, by 24. So that'll give you an idea of what you need for batting and backing. Something doesn't want to lay real smooth there. Okay, now we could quilt this any way we want, and then we could put binding on it like we do most quilts, but there are a lot of corners to go around with binding, and it's not that hard to do, but I thought it would be simpler if we did it another way this time. So I am going to take my 505 temporary adhesive, and I'm going to pull this back. I should have ironed that back a little bit. I'll do that in a little bit. Get all these stray threads off of it. And I'm going to adhere the batting to the backing. I'm gonna go ahead and take the top off completely here. This is like a magnet. Put a little of this. You don't want to use too much because it can gum up your needles. And you don't want overspray to get on your table because this stuff is sticky. Okay, I'm going to turn it upside down and get my ironing board and iron it. I should have done that before, but I didn't think about it. I'm going to iron from the center out to kind of smooth it on there. And I find that ironing helps it adhere a little better too. So it never hurts to iron it after you've sprayed it. Now then, I want to take my my table runner top, and lay it face down and center it as best I can because we want to make sure there's batting everywhere. So you might kind of check that. Now, depending on how you ironed your seams, you might have to clip these corners to get them to lay smoothly. But now we're going to take it over the machine and we're going to sew a 1/4 inch. I'm going to pin it really good though because I don't want it to bunch up and not lay smoothly. But I'll pin it, take it over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch all the way around a 1/4 inch, but I'm going to leave one of these sides, this one probably, open so that I can turn it. I need to move this way a little bit so we can turn it inside out. And then we'll be ready to do some of our big stitch quilting. That seems to be the rage. I'm seeing it all over YouTube. People advertising that how to do it, and it's real simple. So I've been wanting to try it, and I thought this would be the perfect project for that because it's not too big that I'll get bored and put it aside. All right, I'm gonna pin this and then meet me at the sewing machine. Okay, this is the side I'm gonna leave open, but I'm gonna stitch in about 1/2 inch there so that I have my corner stitched down good. But I am using 1/4 inch seams. Now that I've got it all stitched all the way around except for this one side, and I did turn the corner on both of them, so we're going to have to turn this whole table topper from this one hole, but it shouldn't be a problem. Now I'm going to trim up all the excess. Trim it up so it's even with the seam, the outside edge of our table runner. Now that that's done, I want to go to all my corners and clip across them like this. Pretty close, but don't cut your thread. And that will just cut out a lot of the extra bulk. Now, I want to come back and the inverted corners, the corners that point in, I want to clip them right close to the seam, but again, don't cut your seam. Now, a lot of times, I would probably go in here and trim off all this excess batting. Trim it as close to the seam as I could. But for the sake of time, I'm not going to do that today. It'll be okay. We'll stitch it down with some of our quilting, but it'll be a little bulkier at the seams than I usually like it. So now I'm going to turn this right side out. Then I'm going to stick my hand in there between the top and the batting because we have 505 adhesive between the batting and the back. And I'm going to poke out all my corners. Let's see how that looks. Now I'm going to get my ironing board and hope my iron is still on. Yeah, it is. And I'm going to go around the edges and iron them as neatly as possible. Steam them real good too. On my corners, you can either use a pin. I like to use my seam ripper, but you have to be very careful because there's a blade on there that's sharp and you don't want to cut your fabric. But I just use it to kind of pull out the corner a little better. And you can probably see there's a little extra bulk around the edge, but it's not going to hurt anything. We're going to stitch that down anyway. I'm going to turn my sides in. I'm actually going to trim this here just a little bit because it'll help me get that seam turned in smoother. I'm going to put a few pins here. It's hot. One's probably enough. And now we're ready to start our big stitch quilting. So I have threaded up a needle with 2 strands of a green thread that matched my backing pretty well. This backing with some leftover fabric that was in this line and went with these layer cakes. And I'm going to need a ruler, erasable marking pen, and these are not friction pens. These are the Madame So erasable pens. And I'm going to take, let me lay my thread aside for a little bit. But I want mine to look real neat. And so I am going to draw my lines and not just start stitching. I always think I can stitch straight, and then I don't. So I'm going to 1/4 of an inch in. That's not showing up real good. Okay, let's try a different pen. Those have worked real good for me in the past. I don't know, maybe it's because it's hot still from the ironing. That one's going to show up a little bit better. And I'm going to go all the way around the edge. But I'll probably only do a little bit of it at a time, because if it gets hot, it'll erase itself. And I'm going to go on all the seams 1/4 of an inch in. And I'll also do 1/4 of an inch on the other side. So that basically, well, my camera shut down right in the middle of my video there, and I lost everything from there to the end. So I'm going to reconstruct what I did, and I hope that this will be as easy to see as when I did it the first time. I apologize. Basically here, I've got my table runner that I have traced 1/4 of an inch around all the hexagons. I still have a couple I haven't traced out here. And I am drawing, let me find my template, the flowers in there. Now I want to show you what I've done so far, where I've stitched all the way around this hexagon, and I've stitched the flower. I've completed 2 of them, and I've gone around the edges of 2 more here. And I just did that in one evening, so this is going really fast. I mean, one evening of not working that hard. Now, I'm in the middle of a row here, or I'd show you how I start them. But how I start one is I get way off and then come up where I need to be right there in the corner, and I'll pull it through until that thread is hidden in between the fabric. Then hold it down with my thumb and take a stitch, then turn it around and stitch back in that same stitch and take off from there. Now I have, let me get it out here. I'm not a thimble person, but I found this kind of thimble that is called, I think it's pronounced shashiko, the Japanese embroidery that's geometric. I think it's called a shashiko thimble, and I really like it, and I'll show you why. But to stitch on the lines, and I drew the line so I could stitch straight, we're going to take about 1/4 of an inch of a stitch, and then we're going to come up about 1/8 of an inch, go down about 1/4 of an inch, up about 1/8 of an inch. And this thimble here, you can just hit it with the palm of your hand. Go down about 1/4 of an inch, up 1/8 of an inch. I usually take about 3 stitches at once, and then I can push it through with this little leather part, and I'll link this thimble below. I've used, it's served me well on this. So I just continue along, taking about 3 stitches at a time. And I try to come up at a corner. And there's your stitching. I'm using 2 strands of DMC embroidery floss. I picked a color that matched the back. You can barely see the stitches on the back because they're tiny, and that's the way you want them. The purpose of this is not only to quilt it, but it is to the stitch on top, the big stitch, is to be decorative also. So I wanted a contrasting color so you could see it. Now, with most hand quilting, you want little tiny 1/8 of an inch stitches, both top and bottom, all around. But with the big stitch quilting, the purpose is to add another dimension to your quilting, and so it's kind of like embroidery on your quilts, and you do want them to show. And this goes extremely fast. I thought this might be one of those lifetime projects that I worked on here and there to get the hand quilting done, but I'm going to have this done in a day or 2. And I will show it again on one of my videos when it's complete, so you can see the whole thing. And it needs a good pressing, but to me this is a nice neutral table runner or centerpiece for my table, especially in the fall, because these are fall colors. I think I'll make some in Christmas colors and other things, because a long table runner, usually you have to take it out off of the table when you're serving dinner or whatever, especially if it hangs off over the ends, but it just takes up too much room. But this can be in the center where I can set lots of dishes and all sorts of things on it, some candles, whatever. So I'm real pleased with this. Now, the flower, let me draw one over here so you can see it on one of these lighter. What I do is I try to center this best I can. And then I just trace the little slits. And I'll link these below too. I've seen some people that use chalk dust too, just kind of put some chalk dust on here, but to me that sounds kind of messy. Okay, did I get everything? I think so. And there you've got your guide to stitch on. So thank you for joining me for this. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something from it. If you did, please like, subscribe, share, comment. And I am working on a blue and white Jacob's ladder quilt that I think is going to be just gorgeous. I can hardly wait to share it with you. And that will be my next quilt video. I do have family coming in and out of town, and so my schedule's going to be a little erratic, but I will try to still get something out every week. I just don't know if I'll have the quilt finished in time for next week's video or not. We'll see. Again, thank you for joining me. Thank you for all the new subscribers we have, and it just helps me be able to continue making these videos, because I spend as much as I make on this channel. You know, I make few $100s, and that gets eaten up real quick by the fabric. Even though I have a lifelong fabric stash, I always need something else. So I appreciate each and every one of you. I will see you next time, and remember, whatever you do, do it to the glory of the Lord.